Furthermore, they have better sights with superior thermal imagers and magnification, that make them more likely to detect and hit the enemy first, historically, an even greater determinant of the victor in armored warfare than sheer firepower. A Greek trial found that moving Leopard 2s and Abrams hit a 2.3-meter target 19 and 20 times out of 20, respectively, while a Soviet T-80 scored only 11 hits. The modest differences between the two Western tanks reveal different national philosophies. The Abrams has a noisy 1,500 horsepower gas-guzzling turbine, which starts up more rapidly, while the Leopard 2's diesel motor grants it greater range before refueling. The Abrams has achieved some of its extraordinary offensive and defensive capabilities through use of depleted uranium ammunition and armor packages, technologies politically unacceptable to the Germans. Therefore, later models of the Leopard 2A6 now mount a higher velocity 55 caliber gun to make up the difference in penetrating power, while the 2A5 Leopard introduced an extra wedge of spaced armor on the turret to better absorb enemy fire. German scruples also extend to arms exports, with Berlin imposing more extensive restrictions on which countries it is willing to sell weapons to, at least in comparison to France, the United States or Russia. While the Leopard 2 is in service with 18 countries, including many NATO members, a lucrative Saudi bid for between 400 and 800 Leopard 2s was rejected by Berlin because of the Middle Eastern country's human rights records, and its bloody war in Yemen in particular. The Saudis instead ordered additional Abramses to their fleet of around 400. This brings us to Turkey, a NATO country with which Berlin has important historical and economic ties, but which also has had bouts of military government and waged a controversial counterinsurgency campaign against Kurdish separatists for decades. In the early 2000s, under a more favorable political climate, Berlin sold 354 of its retired Leopard 2A4 tanks to Ankara. These represented a major upgrade over the less well-protected M60 Patton tanks that make up the bulk of Turkey's armored forces. However, the rumor has long persisted that Berlin agreed to the sale under the condition that the German tanks not be used in Turkey's counterinsurgency operations against the Kurds. Whether such an understanding ever existed is hotly contested, but the fact remains that the Leopard 2 was kept well away from the Kurdish conflict and instead deployed in northern Turkey, opposite Russia. However, in the fall of 2016, Turkish Leopard 2s of the 2nd Armored Brigade finally deployed to the Syrian border to support Operation Euphrates Shield, Turkey's intervention against ISIS. Prior to the Leopard's arrival, around a dozen Turkish Patton tanks were destroyed by both ISIS and Kurdish missiles. Turkish defense commentators expressed the hope that the tougher Leopard would fare better. The 2A4 model was the last of the Cold War-era Leopard 2s, which were designed to fight in relatively concentrated units in a fast-paced defensive war against Soviet tank columns, not to survive IEDs and missiles fired by ambushing insurgents in long-term counterinsurgency campaigns where every single loss was a political issue. The 2A4 retains an older boxy turret configurations which affords less protection from modern anti-tank missiles, especially to the generally more vulnerable rear and side armor, which is a bigger problem in a counterinsurgency environment, where an attack may come from any direction. This was shockingly illustrated in December 2016 when evidence emerged that numerous Leopard 2s had been destroyed in intense fighting over ISIS-held Al-Bab, a fight that Turkish military leaders described as a trauma, according to Der Spiegel. A document published online listed ISIS as apparently having destroyed 10 of the supposedly invincible Leopard 2s, 5 reportedly by anti-tank missiles, 2 by mines or IEDs, 1 to rocket or mortar fire, and the others to more ambiguous causes. Undoubtedly, the manner in which the Turkish army employed the German tanks likely contributed to the losses. Rather than using them in a combined arms force alongside mutually supporting infantry, they were deployed to the rear as long-range fire support weapons while Turkish allied Syrian militias stiffened with Turkish special forces led the assaults. Isolated on exposed firing positions without adequate nearby infantry to form a good defensive perimeter, the Turkish Leopards were vulnerable to ambushes. The same poor tactics have led to the loss of numerous Saudi Abrams tanks in Yemen. By contrast, more modern Leopard 2s have seen quite a bit of action in Afghanistan combating Taliban insurgents in the service of the Canadian 2A6MS and Danish 2A5S. Though a few were damaged by mines, all were put back into service, though a Danish Leopard 2 crew member was mortally injured by a night attack in 2008. In return, the tanks were praised by field commanders for their mobility and providing accurate and timely fire support during major combat operations in southern Afghanistan. In 2017, Germany began rebuilding its tank fleet, building an even beefier Leopard 2A7V model more likely to survive in the builder of the Leopard 2 tank, was previously reported to be interested in the update program, but it's not known if the company has filed a PQQ now that buying NOR second-hand tanks has been ruled out by the Army. Company officials could not be contacted ahead of going to press. Officially known as the Challenger 2 Life Extension Program, the update, including initial logistics support, could be worth up to £700 million, US $1 billion, said the MOD's contract bulletin. The update program could also be applied to Challenger 2s operated by the Oman government, said the contract's bulletin. The contractors are vying for 2 competitive assessment phase contracts expected to run for 2 years. The duration of the competitive assessment phase is expected to be 2 years, to be confirmed at the bid stage. Future production and delivery dates will be dependent on the solution and approval at the main investment decision point currently scheduled for 2019, said a D&S spokeswoman. After prevaricating over what to do about obsolescence and upgrade issues on the Challenger for several years, the British have now moved to make good on a pledge in the government's recent Strategic Defence and Security Review to update the tank, extending its out-of-service date 10 years to 2035. The move follows a reappraisal of the threat from a resurgent Russia and the public unveiling last year of the new generation T-14 Armata tank at a military parade in Moscow. The previous SDSR in 2010 saw Challenger fleet numbers reduced to 227 vehicles and the British under-investing in a platform seen by some as a Cold War relic. That's changing though, according to Ben Berry, the senior fellow for land warfare at the International Institute for Strategic Studies think tank in London. It's fair to say Challenger 2 has been neglected. Its update was seen as a far lower priority than programs like the Warrior infantry fighting vehicle modernization, he said. 3 things have changed since 2010. The Army now has control of its budget, priorities and
increasingly heavy armor plating. But kinetic active protection systems, such as the Russian Arena system, are growing increasingly popular. Over the past century, the average weight of tanks has quadrupled. One of the first tanks, Little Willie, weighed in at 16.5 tons. The modern American M1 Abrams weighs approximately 70. Most of that weight is armor, and as effective as that's been to keep tanks alive, it comes at a cost in size, weight, speed, and mobility. Over the long term, increasing a tank's size and weight is unsustainable. In the 1970s, the armies of NATO fielded a new generation of anti-tank missiles. The Soviet Union, to protect its investment in a numerically superior tank force, began researching countermeasures. One was the concept of the Active Protection System, or APS. APS involves ringing a tank with sensors, typically millimetric wave radars set up to detect incoming rockets and missiles along the tank's frontal arc. Once an incoming anti-tank round is close enough, the APS launches an interceptor rocket to take out the incoming rocket or missile. Active protection systems are lightweight, effective, and cost less than adding more armor to a tank. The Russian Arena system is developed by the KB Machino-Stroynia Design Bureau located outside Moscow. Arena automatically detects incoming targets at approximately 50 yards and has a 0.07-second reaction time. Anti-tank rockets and missiles, like the Russian RPG-7 and the American TOW, travel at up to 300 yards per second, making them slow enough to be intercepted. But
in Georgia have started field training with the new M1A1 Abrams tanks, the Army announced this week. Soldiers with the 3rd Infantry Division's Delta Tank Company, 6th Squadron, 8th Cavalry Regiment, 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team fired the main and support weapon systems on the M1A1 Abrams tanks during a field training exercise in late March. Gunnery is beyond critical, Army Captain Freddie Mitchell, commander of Delta Tank, said in a press release on Wednesday. It is a necessary event to create lethal crews. Training like this is advantageous to the unit's lethality, Mitchell said. The Army said the tank unit is training to master the ability to close in on enemy forces using fire and movement in order to destroy or capture enemy forces.